All right, this is the beginning of lesson 9. We're going to be preparing for placing the elastic around the waistband of our clown pants. So before we get started on stitching down the waistband, we first need to baste the seams that we've pressed open right on the edge here, so that when we do thread the elastic through, it doesn't get hung up on There's a total of 4 seams around the waistband of the pants. So we want to do like a nice basting stitch along the edges. Now you can do this by hand. This also says you can use interfacing. That's kind of seems interfacing tape or something. But the basting stitch on the machine is pretty easy to use. So it says to keep elastic from getting stuck in the seam allowance, use fusible web or machine basting to anchor them to in the garment casing area. And then you're going to be able to remove it afterwards. That's the basting stitch is very easy to remove. Looking at my machine, here are all my utility stitches. They're like all the basic stitches. So you can see this is like my standard straight stitch. Here's my zigzag. And way over here is my basting stitch. Let me see if I can get that better focused. It looks like a line, dot, line, dot. Okay, so I'm going to select that stitch and just leave it as is and stitch down the edge of those pressed seams. This is actually a really good time to use the feature where we can move the needle to the far right side. That way we can use the edge of the presser foot as a guide, and then we'll be stitching almost right there on the very edge. So if we come here to our basting stitch and press it, maybe I can't move it to the side. Looks like for the basting stitch, it won't let me go to the edge. So instead you can use, can you see on the presser, on this little foot, you've got this little red line. You can put the edge of the seam on the red line, and that will be just such a very short distance from the center, which is where the needle is going to go. And if you place the edge of your pressed seam there, then you'll be able to stitch super close to the edge without, making a mistake. So I'll set it up and show you how that will look. All right, so here I have it set up, ready to stitch, and you'll see my needle is going to fall right here, and the edge of that pressed seam is going to line up with the red dot. So I'll be stitching really close to the edge here, which is what I want. No need to do any reversing because we don't really need this stitch to hold very well anyway. I'm going to stitch probably about 3 inches down, not too far. I'm going to just follow this maybe to about there. All right, so you can see where I've basted the right-hand side, and the left side is going to be just the same, but using the opposite red dot for the edge of the fabric. Going down, I don't know, like 3-4 inches. Okay, so this is what it looks like once the basting is done. The nice thing about the basting stitch is when you're finished with it, all you do is take one string and pull it and the whole thing will come out. So all you're doing is like cleaning up thread. You don't have to use your seam ripper or anything like that. It saves you a lot of trouble when you're threading the elastic through so many seams too. The next step is to create the casing for the elastic. And what we'll be doing is stitching or pressing 1.5 inches on the upper edge to the inside, so to the wrong side. And then we're going to form the casing, and then we're going to press the raw edge 1/4 inch under. So that is going to all happen with the iron and with a little ruler. Now on my ironing board, I have a grid, and I think Mom's ironing board does too. And that makes it really easy to do things like pressing under But you can also use the metal ruler. I know Mom has a French curve, which looks like the letter D, basically, and you can use that metal to press really easily 1.5 inches. So if you can locate that French curve that she has, that's what it's called. It looks like a metal D. It's kind of like maybe 8 inches by 6 inches, like shaped straight on one side and then like a little curve on the other. Yeah, and then we're gonna, once we fold over the 1/4 inch, then we're gonna stitch the edge really close, leaving an opening that's big enough for the elastic. Okay, so first we'll do the pressing. This is one way that you can accomplish that fold, is on your ironing board you find like, you know, a good starting place. So I've got a 10.5, and I can wrap it back to 9 and then create my seam there. The other thing you can do is actually measure all the way around and put pins and then just fold it at the pins and iron it. Or you can stitch, you know, 1.5 inches on the edge. You could do a basting stitch or just like any kind of stitch, you know, 1.5 inches around, and then it makes it really easy to fold it down. So any of those ways to fold it over is really easy. And then this is, you know, you just find like a 1/4 inch, and it's very easy to see. It's just like a tiny little tuck. So it's gonna look like about like that when we're finished. Okay, so fold it over, iron it at 1.5 inches, and then press it toward the inside, so toward the seams. And here is my 1.5 inch pressed to the inside for the elastic casing. And here's another tool you can use, especially for that 1/4 inch fold under. Until you start to like kind of eyeball what's the right amount, you can set this little gauge to the degree that you want to fold it over. You just line that up, and then you use your thumb to kind of tuck it under and then hold that spot while you press. Okay, so that's the next step. I'm going to press under that 1/4 inch. Be careful of your fingers, because this is where you burn yourself accidentally. I also prefer to like kind of open it up and then press it here. That way I'm not like tucking under. I can really see the amount that I do. And the most important thing is you've got to have more than 1 inch here, because your elastic is 1 inch wide. Like this has to be more than 1 inch. All right, so I've got my 1/4 inch turn under, and I've got my 1.5 inch turn under, all toward the inside. And the next step is to stitch as close to this edge as I can. All right. By the way, that last step, I turned the steam off on my iron, and that really helped to not fry my fingers. So I'm going to pin this in place in a couple of places so that this, like here's an example, here's a seam. I want that seam to line up. I don't care about the pattern because this is the inside, but I want to make sure the seams line up and it's not shifted someplace funny. The other thing is you have to leave open a section like about 2 inches wide so that you can work the elastic in and out. All right, I'm all pinned up about every 6 inches, and especially at the seams. And I've got myself set up. Again, I'm gonna stitch, I'm gonna line up the edge of the fabric with that red dot, and my needle is gonna be just like 1 millimeter to the right of that. So I'm gonna keep my eye on that red dot. I'm gonna try to keep this edge lined up the whole time. Go kind of slow, and then make sure that, you know, since you're stitching around a circle, you have your pants all set up around that circle, and you keep spinning the whole fabric so you don't end up stitching over a part of the pants that you don't want to stitch over. So you just keep the whole thing rotating around the top of the cylinder. Okay. All right, now let's stitch it. Also, you can see I'm starting a little bit to the right of the center back seam, and I'm gonna stop right here. And actually I'm gonna put a second pin here just to remind me to stop. so I don't mess up and stitch too much. All right, so we've got it stitched, the casing stitched all the way around with a little hole here. That's where we're going to be inserting our elastic in the next step, step 10.